Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. Tonight's story was written by my niece, Megan Moore. It's a story of a little fishing village and a story of family. It's a story of stories being passed down from one generation to the next. And it's a story of family and how we can learn from the generations that go before us. I hope you like it. One small thing, if my work is helping you and you'd like to hear a lot of it ad-free, you can support me on Patreon. The link is below this video. Okay, let's do the relaxation session now, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever you lie upon tonight. But beneath all of that, feel the earth that is always supporting you, always there for you. Our home. And as you become aware of that constant support, see if it allows you to let go a little bit more now, to ease into this moment a little bit more now. 9. You are safe. You are okay. And in this feeling of safety, in this place of comfort, allow my voice to be an anchor of safety tonight. Know that my voice will only ever take you to safe places, to safe destinations, to a safe refuge of deep sleep. 8. Feel into your body now. Just notice anything. That's all you need to do. Maybe it's a tingling. Maybe it's a slight pain. Whatever it is, just notice. Maybe it's in your feet. Maybe in your legs. Maybe your belly. Your chest, or your face. And as you notice whatever you notice, See if you're holding anywhere. And if you are, just let go a little bit more now. Seven. The day is done. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. But right now, in this moment, you don't need to think about the past or the future. Allow yourself the luxury of embracing this very moment. And of course, thoughts will arrive, and as they do, don't fight them. Know that they are a part of being a human being. Just see them for what they are. Thoughts. And watch them go like leaves on a moonlit river, or clouds passing in a starlit sky. Six. This is your time. This is your moment. Nobody else's. We are best when we give ourselves time, when we allow peace to be a part of our experience of life. So allow yourself to let go, to be kind to yourself, to know that you deserve this moment and this opportunity of rest. 5. Peace lives within you. It's just waiting to be found. See if you can find it tonight. And if you do, where does it live? In your heart? In your head? Have a look for it and notice if you can sense it. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things, the shelter you have tonight, the peace of this moment, the opportunity of rest. 3. Begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see the ocean, and next to it, a beautiful little fishing village. Begin to see the boats and the people. Perhaps begin to smell the calming and healing sea air and begin to realize that this place is far away from all that you know. 2. Feel into your body one more time now. And just let go of any residual tension or anything you're holding on to. Your body has worked hard for you today. It deserves rest. 1. Completely letting go now as I tell you tonight's sleep story. Along the coast of a large and ancient sea was a quaint village that sustained itself for centuries through the selling and trading of freshly caught fish. Travelers would pass through the village often on their way to a larger city down the coast, and over time, the village received a reputation for having the freshest fish around. It was a small village with a population of nearly 300, but nearly every household had a fisherman. Day in and day out, the main street would be lined with wooden stalls filled with fresh fish caught earlier that day, as well as handmade items crafted from shells found on the beach. The town always had travelers passing through, and the merchant stalls were open almost year-round. The wooden docks that extended into the sea were full of boats varying in size, all with creative names painted on their sides. One of these boats was an old fishing vessel called the Pathfinder that was passed down through generations. Despite its outdated wooden hull and shabby state, it was one of the most reliable boats in the village. The Pathfinder was owned by a small family in the village and was used by a woman named Maggie and her son, Frank. The fishing boat was first bought by Maggie's grandfather, then passed down to his son, who passed it down to her. The boat had seen some great adventures and weathered some fierce storms, but it always found the path home, which is how it got its name. Over the years, some modifications were made, but it still ran like it was brand new, and Maggie had no plans on replacing it. Now Maggie was preparing for her son to inherit the fishing boat, as she took him with her nearly every time she went out to sea. He was still young, but Maggie had a sense that he was ready to learn the ways of their family and become one of the best fishermen in the village. It was just a normal day, and Maggie was up before dawn, and the sky was dark with night as she got ready. She dressed warm, in wool socks and a knitted sweater, before going to her son's room to wake him up. Frank was usually reluctant to get out of bed, but when he realized that he was going fishing, he perked right up. While Frank prepared their equipment, Maggie made a simple, warm breakfast, being sure to leave extra for her father once he awoke. She then packed their lunch for the day, and they were off. They walked through the village towards the docks, with only the street lamps as their guide. Their poles and equipment jostling together as they made their way down the hill. At the end of the dock was Maggie's loyal vessel, the Pathfinder, which sat tall and proud on the docks as one of the oldest, most experienced boats on the harbor. It swayed gently from side to side, patiently waiting for its excursion into the sea. Frank boarded while Maggie removed the ropes holding the ship to the dock before following her son on board. She switched on the old engine and listened as it hummed to life. Moments later, they were off, steadily wading out into the dark, open waters. Maggie glanced behind her from the windows in the bridge to see the lights of the village grow more faint. Now the lights of the boat illuminated their path. The sky was a dusty blue as the sun neared the horizon. Maggie powered off the engine after coming to a stop. The water was so calm and still, it looked solid, as though she could step right off the boat and onto the surface of the sea. After some moments of appreciating the early morning silence, Maggie and Frank descended the bridge onto the deck, where they got to work setting up. Frank needed little guidance, as he had been out with his mother dozens of times and understood what he needed to do. They prepared their fishing rods with bait and flashy lures before casting out. Maggie helped Frank cast his rod out, showing him the motion of swinging it before snapping it forward to achieve a long distance. Once both rods were securely anchored to the boat, they settled in their chairs to wait. They sat side by side in their folding chairs. The salty breeze was still gentle this early in the morning as it caressed their faces. Waves softly lapped against the wooden hull of the boat in a soft rhythm, while gulls circled overhead. Not much time passed before Maggie and Frank were busy catching fish one by one. These fish that would help them continue in their life. These fish that gave life to their village. And as they caught them, they sat in gratitude for the gift provided by the sea. Then the sunrise finally came, and this was Maggie's favorite part of the day. To watch the sun illuminate the world around them, and the best place to witness it was on the water. They both sat in silence, mother and son, just being a part of nature, being at one with nature. Their breaths in unison, breathing deeply in and out. In and out. When they were ready to go back to town, Maggie started the engine back up. This time, she let Frank steer while she guided him. But she trusted the boat, as it always led them back home. Now the docks were bustling with people as the fishermen returned from their morning excursions. Maggie's father was at the dock waiting for them, as he usually was, to help them dock and unload the fish. Occasionally, he would join them on their fishing trips, but since his retirement, he enjoyed sleeping in. But he always loved to greet them on the docks upon their return and listen to Frank as he excitedly recanted the events of the morning in great detail. He latched the boat to the dock while Maggie and Frank started bringing in the fish. They loaded them on a cart before bringing them to the market sellers, who would put them on ice to sell that afternoon. There were many travelers passing through the village this time of year, and Maggie was sure that they would sell everything. Maggie and her family had an arrangement with a family of merchants. Maggie would catch the fish in the morning, and the merchants would sell them for a share of the profit. Sure, Maggie could have had her own market stall and stand out all day with her fish, but after spending the morning catching them, she was exhausted, and she wanted to spend the rest of the day with her family. After sending the fish away and docking the boat, Maggie, her father, and Frank walked back to their house. On their way back, they walked along the coast near the small beach. In the summertime, it was full of villagers relaxing on sunny days. But in the off-season, it was empty, as it was too cold and windy. Frank loved to go there to look for shells and sea glass to add to his collection. Today was no different. Maggie and her father sat on some rocks, while Frank sifted through the sand, running up and down the beach as the waves ebbed and flowed. Maggie looked up at the rocky cliffs that overlooked the beach. There once stood a great castle made of stone, perched among the jagged rocks. The legend was that it belonged to a wealthy family many centuries ago, when kings and queens ruled over the land and the sea. The castle had long since been abandoned and had been reduced to ruin. Now, all that remained was the strong stone foundations, cracked and weathered by time. Maggie always liked to imagine what the castle would have looked like if it were still standing. She wondered what it would have been like to see the first light of day peeking over the sea from the tallest spire. She wondered if the windows were stained glass, and if it had grand, echoing halls. Perhaps a princess lived there, who would gaze out at the sea and dress in fine silks from distant kingdoms, dreaming of adventures at sea. The sound of Frank's footsteps running through the sand brought Maggie from her thoughts. He grinned widely as he showed her a piece of sea glass that he discovered. It was a deep green color. Its once sharp edges had been rounded from its time in the sea and among the sand. Maggie smiled, telling him that it was another fine piece for his collection. The family then headed back through the village towards their home. Maggie was eager for a warm bath and a change of clothes. Throughout the afternoon, Frank worked on his studies for school, his grandfather seated beside him, offering his help where he could, while Maggie tended the garden. She lounged in the sun, closing her eyes as she absorbed its warmth, the wind bringing in the smell of salt from the sea. Gulls sang overhead as the trees rustled in the strong breeze. Maggie snacked on some fresh-cut cucumber and tomato, listening to the sounds of nature. Her son's laughter echoed out through the open windows as her father told him one of his jokes. Maggie wasn't sure how much time had passed, but she figured it was about time to start preparing for dinner. Frank had disappeared to his room, and she found her father in the sunlit kitchen, washing the fresh vegetables she had just harvested from the garden. Smiling, She handed him a chopping knife and a worn cutting board. They chatted lightly as they focused on their tasks. Maggie cutting up the vegetables in uneven chunks, while her father cleaned the fish. The conversation flowed as naturally as their movements, casual and effortless. They talked about Frank's latest fascination with hermit crabs, fishing spots along the coast, and the changing season. They worked efficiently, enjoying one another's company. Maggie had always been close with her father, as he was the one to introduce her to the sea. She remembered the early mornings on the boat, bundled in sweaters and blankets when she was Frank's age. She recalled the small yellow fishing rod her father had gifted her, which she would use every day until she outgrew it. Everything she knew about the sea she had learned from her father. He taught her how to bait a hook, read the tides, and pilot the fishing vessel. The same skills she now passed down to her son. When her mother got sick, Maggie found that her sanctuary was out at sea, early in the morning with her father. Maggie grew even closer with him and moved back in to live with him after her mother had eventually passed. She needed him as much as he needed her in those times, but it felt natural to move back into her childhood home, grateful to give Frank the same magical childhood experience that she remembered having. Maggie could see how much it meant to her father to be close to his grandson, to watch his fascination and love for the sea grow and blossom. Her father's eyes would light up when Frank would ask him to tell one of his great sea tales, even if he had heard it over 100 times before. As they finished preparing dinner, the aroma of the sea bream filled the house, summoning a hungry Frank from his room. He bounced eagerly on his heels as Maggie filled his ceramic bowl with the steaming stew. They gathered around the table and emptied their bowls, Frank went for seconds as he passionately shared new fun facts about crustaceans, which he had just read about in an encyclopedia. Maggie's heart warmed at the sight of her son and father laughing and joking together. Her father's once austere demeanor had softened with age, replaced now with joy and comfort. After dinner, Frank and Maggie cleaned up the kitchen and stored away the leftovers, while her father went to the living room to start a fire in the hearth. The afternoon had been warm and comfortable, but now that the sun had disappeared beyond the horizon, the air was much cooler and brisk. Frank readied himself for bed, dressed in a onesie, adorned in a pattern of colorful fish, before curling up next to his mother on the sofa, wrapped up in knitted blankets. The fire burned in the hearth as Maggie's father settled in his worn but beloved armchair. He sank into it with a long exhale before stretching out his feet and crossing them at the ankle. Frank asked his grandfather to share one of his great fishing tales. Frank had heard all of them before, but he loved to hear them from his grandfather, and his grandfather loved to tell them. He was a great storyteller, as most fishermen were, sharing their adventurous tales from out at sea. "Oh, I don't know," Maggie's father said dubiously, but a familiar glint shone in his green eyes. "Please," Frank begged, eager to hear the story that he had already heard just the other night. "Oh, all right." His grandfather gave in, his face creasing in a warm smile before he began. "Once upon a time, when I was young and spry," he paused. He always began his stories like that, earning a chuckle from his grandson. "It's true, back in those days, I could hoist a sail and cast a line out faster than any other fisherman in the village. At that time, I had a crew as daring as I was, and we were after the big one. I had been spending all my days looking for one of the most rare fish in the world, a great sea sturgeon. That fish had evaded capture for over 50 years. Only legends existed of it. Locals would say it wasn't a fish at all, but a great sea monster that wrecked the ships of anyone trying to catch it. They say it had a ridged back like a dragon, and that it was as massive as a fishing boat. But that didn't scare me. I knew I had to catch it. One day, I had a feeling that I would find it, deep in my gut. That afternoon, I rounded up my crew and we set off for the sea, despite the warnings of a great storm approaching. Everyone in the village said we were crazy for going out, but I never defy a gut feeling. As predicted, the storm came in massive, angry clouds that blocked the sun in the sky almost completely. The water came in great waves, sweeping across the deck. He told the story dramatically, waving his arms in grand movements to emphasize his tale. Maggie smiled, but Frank was completely infatuated, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Then what happened? Did the storm make you turn back? Frank asked, although he already knew the story by heart. Maggie's father smiled knowingly. No storm is strong enough to turn me back. No, we fought on, working tirelessly to keep the ship upright against waves that were 3 times taller than this very house. We were all so busy on deck that we had forgotten our lines were still cast out. And that's when I noticed one of the rods was nearly bent in half. In that moment, I just knew I had caught the fish. I raced across the deck to my fishing rod and grabbed before I could think anything through properly. The strength of the fish was so strong, it nearly pulled me from the deck. Luckily for me, one of my quick-thinking crew members grabbed a rope and tied me to the bridge to keep me from going overboard. The storm was fierce, rain falling heavily, while thunder boomed and lightning flashed across the sky. But my crew and I had only one thought: catch that fish. But we had never experienced anything so strong. I thought for sure my rod was going to snap right in half. At that point, I was starting to believe all of those tall tales that it wasn't a fish at all, but a sea monster. But I didn't back down. That fish would have had to bring down the whole ship to get me to give up. Then, in one fell swoop, the Pathfinder thrashed to the side, and I swear it was helping us in that moment, because that was the final pull we needed to get the fish on board. It was big, as big as they say, even bigger. I would say that it was the length of 15 men. The deck of the boat was barely big enough to hold it. And then a great wave came aboard and swept the great fish back into the sea, and it took my lucky rod with him. Even if no one believes me, I know that I bested one of the greatest sea creatures to ever exist and live to tell the tale. So he's still out there? Frank questioned. I believe he is. I think that fish is still roaming the sea, and maybe one day you'll catch him, Frank. Say hello and let him go again. And just like that, Frank dozed off, his head leaning against his mother, with a sleepy smile still on his lips. Even the most exciting story couldn't keep him awake. Maggie rose gently, wrapping her arms around her sleeping son and lifting him. The blankets draped over his body as she held him close. She bid her father good night before heading up the narrow staircase towards his bedroom. The room was dimly lit only by the moonlight spilling in through the window as she laid him on his bed. She tucked him in, bringing the quilt up to his chin before pressing a kiss on his forehead. He muttered something about catching the biggest fish in the sea as he shifted under the blankets. Maggie smiled at her brave, adventurous son and whispered good night, knowing he will dream of a great adventure at sea.